good evening, everybody. It's that time again. Thank you all for joining us tonight for this edition of Man Up, our men's empowerment seminar series hosted by Adimu Men of Excellence. My name is Brian Anthony Campbell, the founder and host of tonight's conversation that we hope will definitely be enlightening and inspirational for all those who are participating and viewing the conversation tonight. So we want to welcome everyone. We want to all those of you who are watching on Facebook and on YouTube. We ask if you would to go ahead and hit that share button wherever you might be watching. We want to try to connect as many people to this conversation as possible tonight. So we do ask that if you are watching on Facebook or YouTube, that you please go ahead and share this conversation tonight, because we believe that it will definitely be enlightening and beneficial to a lot of folks. So please go ahead and do that. Just a few preliminaries. If you have any questions during tonight's conversation, if you're here in the Zoom room, go ahead and leave your comments in the chat. And the last few minutes of the conversation tonight, we will address any question that we have in the chat that have not already been addressed. So please, just a reminder, if you have any questions tonight, please go ahead and add them in the chat section of the Zoom room. And if you're watching online on live stream, Facebook, we are on the Adimu page. We're on my personal page. We're also on YouTube, the Adimu channel on YouTube. But if you have any questions and you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can write those in the comment section as well. We'll try to get to those if we can. Nevertheless, again, good evening to everybody. Thank you once again for joining us. This is Man Up, our Men Empowerment Series. And these conversations that we've been having every Tuesday this month have been designed to help and encourage boys and men to be all that we have been created to be. And so we've decided to just cover different issues that men are confronted with on a day-to-day basis, things that we need to know more about to help us be the best men that we can be. And for those of you who may be joining us tonight who may not be familiar with the organization Adimu, Adimu Men of Excellence is an organization I started 21 years ago, as a matter of fact, at Blanchard High School in Pompano Beach, Florida. And our mission is to develop young men of character who exemplify respect, responsibility, brotherhood, and leadership. And so that's what we have been striving to do. We have our chapter at Blanche Healy in Pompano Beach. We also have a middle school chapter at Silver Lakes Middle School in North Lauderdale, Florida. And we also have a chapter in Los Angeles, California, which was started by one of our alumni. And so for over 21 years, that's what we've been all about, trying to develop young men of character. And so we want to give a shout out to our alumni who are watching tonight, who are joining us tonight. We're in the Zoom room. We appreciate you guys for joining us today. Hopefully our conversation will be beneficial to you as well. Tonight, we are talking about relationships and marriage. That's something I believe every man should have some knowledge and understanding of, because we were not put on this earth to live in isolation. We have to learn to relate to other people. And one of the groups that we have to relate to, and God designed it, I believe, are females, women. And so we're going to be talking about relationship dynamics and things related to marriage. And in particular, we're going to talk about what men need to know and do in order to have healthy relationships, better relationships, stronger relationships, marriages that last. And so that is going to be the focus of our conversation tonight: relationships and marriage, things about love, romance, all those kinds of things. We just want to make sure that we help our men to be strong and have healthy relationships with women, because we know there's been a lot of issues related to that over the years. Joining me tonight on our panel, we have an outstanding group of individuals who are going to be joining me in this conversation tonight. I call them my panel of experts. They come from various walks of life, and we definitely appreciate them for joining us tonight. I want to introduce first Alvin L. Daniels Jr. He is the senior minister of the Hope Church of Christ in Hollywood, Florida. He and his wife, Cynthia, have been married for how long? Brother Daniels, how long have you and Cynthia been married?
Forever. We've been married for 31 wonderful years. 31.
31 wonderful years. That's great. And they have three children. And so we appreciate Brother Daniels for joining us tonight. Also, I want to welcome Brian Oliver, who is a good friend of Adimu. Mr. Oliver and has been associated with Adimu since we started 21 years ago. And so he knows a whole lot about this organization. We just appreciate him for joining with us tonight. He and his wife, Cassandra, are the owners of KWA, which is a branding company. Did I say that right? Branding, is that the wording now?
That is, absolutely.
Yeah. How long have you and Cassandra been married now?
I know this, 17 years. 17 years so far.
Yeah, don't get that wrong. Don't get it wrong.
Right? I said, I know this. I get quizzed once a year on this, so I know.
And they have 2 children, and we appreciate you, Mr. Oliver, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Also, we couldn't have this conversation about relationships without having a woman's perspective. So I appreciate this young lady for accepting our invitation to join the conversation tonight. Let me see. I gotta get her bio. You know, she got a lot of good stuff going on, so I want to make sure I read it correctly. Miss Sherry Robinson is a graduate of Blanchard High School and the University of Florida. Sherry serves her community via beautification services as a cosmetologist and working with youth via Legacy of Change Incorporated. But she also enjoys having in-depth discussions that engage the Christian community. She enjoys discussing how to navigate through relationships for young Black individuals. Good evening, Sherry Robinson. Thank you for joining us.
Good night, everybody.
We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And last but not least, good friend of mine, young man that I invited to join us tonight. He is also a graduate of Blanchard High School and Florida Atlantic University. Dynamic young man doing a lot of great things. And so we want to welcome tonight Mark Zealy. Mark, why don't you turn on your camera, man, so we can see you. And don't forget to unmute yourself. We got to always remind people about that to make sure that they unmute themselves. And there you go.
Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get right into this conversation. Over the last few decades, and these are just some notes that I've written down for some questions tonight. Over the last few decades, marriage has been and this is done based on an article that I read. Over the last few decades, marriage has been a declining institution among all Americans. This decline is most evident in the Black community. From 1890 to the 60s, African Americans aged 35 and older were more likely to be married than white Americans. But in 2019, only 30% of African Americans were married compared to 48% of all Americans. 50% of African Americans in 2019 had never been married compared to 34% of all Americans. When you hear those numbers and you see how they have changed over the years, I want to begin by asking the question, what do you attribute to the decline in marriage in our society? What do you attribute to that? What are some things that you believe have caused that decline? When you see was up there in the, before the 60s, and then something happened in the 60s and after that to cause this decline. But what do you attribute to that? And so you all can jump in and share your thoughts on that question.
I can start.
Go ahead.
One thing, well, personally for me, and with my generation, the millennials, a lot of us, it could be an opinion of mine, we don't really see healthy marriages with our parents our friends of our parents, neighbors, and it's just whole stigma of like, you know, marriages, you know, it's supposed to be hard, but all we hear about are divorces and stuff like that. And when I hear about stuff like that, it kind of like, it scares me to like, man, like if they can't do it, I can't do it. So personally, like an example would be great for us. And like, even with me, some of my friends that have been getting married or the ones who are thinking about getting married, they're running into many obstacles for many reasons. I don't want to say, but
Yeah.
it's tough when stuff like that happens. But I'll say examples. We don't get a lot of examples in the church, in the community. To be like honest and quite frank, I see a lot of single parents, and it's just kind of like, you know, there's not an example for us, so it's kind of hard.
Yeah. All right.
I'll chime in as well and say that from my observation, for as a woman, education plays a big role in that. We haven't really been love bound as previous generations have been. We have more so been seeking our careers. And unfortunately, sometimes as a result of that, love and marriage and relationships kind of take the back burner because you have your goals in mind. And as a result of what transpired with the other generations relationships, like Markeno was saying, there was a lot of trauma that occurred in those older generation relationships that we found out as we aged, that we said we don't want to go through that. A lot of it has to do with financial capabilities, education, didn't want to have kids early. A lot of us are not having children in our teenagers like they were back then. So there's a plethora of factors that have led to women specifically having the decline in marriage. Then of course that would also trickle over to the men because they need the women to get married too. So, but for us, I think it's been education and then just taking the observation of what has transpired with the older generations, which has plagued our view on marriage and rushing, quote unquote, rushing to get married.
Go ahead, Brian.
Oh no, Alvin, you go ahead.
No, I defer to you, man. You much older than me. Go ahead.
Don't believe it, man. Don't believe it.
Okay, I'll take it tonight. So definitely two great points that both were raised. One was a lack of examples, and then the other being a mind shift in from generational mind shift as far as from a female perspective with Shari, you said, and which greatly appreciated, and to what is done when you get into adulthood, or what is seeked, I guess, first, which when you get into adulthood. And that's why I kind of really wanted to throw in or add in the idea of expectations. A big difference is generationally speaking, back generations ago, the expectation was for man and woman graduate high school. So you talk about education, for example, graduate high school, you find a mate, you get married, have kids till death do you part. And you had examples of everyone in the community, or most people in the community, doing that. So you saw it, you knew that was what was going to happen. And that kind of your plan or your life plan was kind of mapped out, and it included that, or those things, those boxes that needed to be checked. And as we became more educated, more aware, and understood more of what's also available to us in life, out in addition to marriage. Shari, you hit the nail on the head, and something that I wanted to say, our expectations then changed. Now it became, I want to go to school after high school. I want a higher education. I want a career. And those things took a back burner. Other things kind of took the back burner in addition to it. But it still kind of shifted all around expectations. What we once expected in our lives has now changed to other things that that started to consume, and therefore less and less examples of long-lasting marriages came into play. Also, what came into play were the idea of getting divorced back generations ago was not even a thought. It was so taboo. It was so it was frowned upon so much that no one dared. Very few people even dared to do it. Now it has become something that is expected, unfortunately, in some cases, to the staggering numbers that Mr. Campbell talked about, as far as more than 50% in some cases of marriages end up in divorce. Every other person that gets married is now divorced. So it's not only accepted, it's in some ways expected. And that has gotten to our psyche as well when it comes to marriage, and therefore has led to less and less examples of people who are married in long marriages. So it really just to me, not that it's a simple answer as far as expectations, but it just seems like the what we learned about marriage and what we expected from marriage has totally changed over the years. It's become a byproduct as opposed to a goal, or as opposed to an achievement, or as opposed to part of the plan. It's become, if that happens, great. If it happens and it sucks, oh well, I'll get divorced, try again. That's become the thought process now about marriage, as opposed to it being that thing that everybody did, looked for, reached for. You were blessed to do it. You were happy to do it. And not that it was perfect. It definitely was never perfect, but it was still something that was valued a lot more than it is now.
Okay, I should have went first, Brian, because I would have sounded smart if I had gone before you. So I think everybody is pretty much really articulating the factors in their multiplicity of factors. And if there was like one factor that I had to kind of throw out to kind of envelop all of those factors, is a cultural decline. We're actually living in a counterculture. That is, the mores and the morals of society have declined so much that, simply put, men and women are responding to the atmospherics of our moral barometer. And Martin and Gina, some of the examples that we see now, some of the more contemporary examples, Martin and Gina, they never married. When I was coming up, my three sons, Father Knows Best, Little House on the Prairie, and then you got Cosby and them, and they were married. They kind of modeled.
Martin and Gina wound up getting married.
I don't remember that. I didn't catch that episode. And
it was the end. So
it was at the very end. Yeah.
Very end.
And so, we're kind of responding to, some people say art mirrors society, and some people say society mirrors art. And I think they go both ways. I think we're simply responding to more turpitude. And marriage has always been, both biblically and also socially, the thing that really sets the tone and the tenor, or the reflection of whatever the moral code is. And so I simply say, among the other factors, the economic factors, some people say it's better for me to just kind of go it alone. And then if you can get the milk without buying the cow, why not do that? And then you have the distractions. You have more women than men, at a ratio of almost 3 to 1. And so you got a guy out there saying that, I like, strawberry, I like chocolate, and I like, coconut. And it's hard for him to kind of pick one flavor. Why pick one flavor when you can have 3 flavors? So that factors into it. And then you have maladjusted men who are not just prepared for marriage. I ain't even ready. My daddy didn't raise me to be a married man, one woman man. And my mother certainly didn't do that as well. And I didn't see it. And so all of these factors combined kind of contributes to where we are like right now as relates to marriage.
Appreciate that. And I want to just start where you left off, Brother Dan. You talking about maladjusted men. Um, are we preparing, or how can we prepare men for healthy relationships with women? Because I often sense this is, and I guess even more so now with social media, it always seems like there's some tension between men and women, especially within the Black community. That Black men and Black women is always what is promoted or what is put out there is that there is some friction that like Black men and Black women don't get along well. You know, what can we do to change that narrative? Because I believe when you talk about the atmosphere of the culture, you know, that's the narrative that I often hear, that, you know, we just can't get along with each other. You listen to how sometimes Black men talk about Black women and Black women talk about Black men. And I think that just contributes to that friction that exists. But what can we do to change that narrative?
Can I go first so I sound smart, y'all?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Booker T said it is easier to raise strong children than to repair broken men. I think we have to start with the younger generation, with the children. Because by the time we go after like broken men and maladjusted men to kind of get them to another place, we've allowed the children to kind of absorb, collect, and be the recipients of those maladjusted behaviors, attitudes, sentiments about women, family, whatever the case might be. So I think we begin with the younger generation. I mean, what you're doing right now, AC, with Adimu, catching them in school, training them, teaching them, modeling, manhood, responsibility, family values, marriage, and being, culturally and community responsible for what happens in our community, especially the Black community. I think what you're doing right now goes a long way to accomplish that. I think if we do that across the board, and at the same time, we can walk and chew gum, still work with men, help men, because we kind of pass down generationally some trauma, some pain, attitudes, negative sentiments about women and relationship, as Mark has mentioned. Mark put the nail in it, hit the nail on the head by saying that the millennials now, they're looking at everything, and they're very much observant as to what has transpired generationally, and they're looking at it and saying, well, I don't even see it. And it's not that it's not there, it's that the counterculture has become more prominent. The subculture has become the main culture, and the main culture has become the subculture. Why? Because we're not putting it out there like that. And I think much of what we can do is kind of model it, promote it, and for lack of a better term, market it, make marriage great again. Not wear the red cap and all that, but make marriage great again, and just put it out there. This is a wonderful thing. But the way we talk about it tends to dissuade people from going in that direction. So
yeah, that's something that Mark alluded to. Anybody else? What can we do to change that narrative about the relationship dynamics between specifically Black men and Black women?
I personally think like men who are I guess married, who are having a successful marriage, they should speak up more, honestly. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't see more examples of it. But it could be because, the media portrays especially Black men a certain way, where I know there are men that are married, that are successfully married, that are happy. I mean, we just don't hear about it often, and it has a lot to do with the media. Like Brother Alvin Daniels said, TV shows, they're just showing, Black women raising children on their own, Black men in jail. It's just, if we see more examples of it, it'll probably give us hope. And I think that's all our generation probably needs more. but it has a lot to do with the culture itself. The culture is just anti-marriage. Like, you know what? You don't have to do this. You can go to school, get a whole bunch of money, and then, you know, you don't have to get married. It's a piece of paper anyways, you know, like they say. So that's like what's actually going on right now. You just, you know, move in. Y'all are already married now. Y'all are already married. So why
just about married? It's like y'all married.
Yeah. So that's the thing too. You know, a lot of us we're living together, so it's just kind of like, so why get married? Why get you know, my generation likes to say, why get the government involved? We have a good thing going. And even if it's not good, you know, that's just what I'm hearing, what I see around. And that's, I guess, just finding a way to promote the healthy marriages, especially in the Black community with Black men. That's like,
well, before you go, Sherry, I wanted to say, because before we even get to the marriage part, it just seems like there's some dynamics in how we relate to each other, even in the dating in that particular stage. You know, there's some red flags and some issues that are there, some trauma that's occurring there that, you know, is preventing some from even reaching that goal. So what can we do to make that even better?
Funny enough, because that's what I was going to bring up. One of the things that I've noticed is that as a result of the trauma that we have been in, men and women, we're communicating more. The issue is that we're not effectively communicating what's going on with us or what has transpired with us. So instead of talking to each other, we're talking at each other, expecting the other person to know what it is that we've been through. And that just messes up the whole dichotomy that we're trying to fix, right? And part of the other issue is, honestly, a lot of young people just do not see the point of getting married, legally getting married. They see the discord with divorce. They see people who have been married for 30, 40, 50 years get divorced. They see the abuse. They see the mistreatment. They see the infidelity, which is a huge deal breaker for us. So a lot of us would just rather be single than to have to possibly deal with that type of treatment. And honestly, that's what it is. In order to fix it, one of the things, like I said, we are doing is being able to have the discussion. Social media does help, but it does hurt a lot because you end up having these shows that show all of this just bad behavior. It shows all of this trauma. Then you have these healing shows that kind of make you feel as if this is what's supposed to be happening. You try and implement into your own life, but then don't realize that everything doesn't work for everyone. And you have these assumptions of what a marriage should be, but you don't have the example. So you're kind of creating it in your head, what it should be. And then if you don't have a belief system, or maybe you're not rooted in your faith, of course, I'm Christian. So for me, I try very, very hard to find Christian examples. My church is very good at providing those type of things, but you're also trying to find examples in the world or outside of the church, I guess you would say, that are also still successful, because every marriage is not going to be something that you're going to want to have. You have to cultivate that yourself. But a lot of it is that we have our own trauma that we're trying to deal with, and we're actually trying to heal ourselves before we decide to get into a relationship, which takes time, which ends up having us be older because we don't want to have to deal with it, or we don't want to deal with as much of it in the relationship when we should have dealt with it before.
Brian, you want to add anything to that?
No, yes, these are all great. And Sherry, I'm a communication guy. I'm a communication major. My whole life is about communicating with people on a day-to-day basis. So I was absolutely going to go there as well. But you talked about how can we, or what are some ways that we can kind of fix that. It definitely starts and ends with communication. But before we even get to communication with the opposite sex, it also you have to understand why you are the way you are, why you feel the way you feel. Words and even actions can hurt other people, but you are never wrong for how you feel. There are reasons why you feel the way you feel, whether it was instilled in you or whether there were experiences that happened to you, whether there's, it could be a number of reasons as to why you feel the way you feel, but you're never wrong for it. But what we often don't do as humans, I'm not even saying male, female, I'm not saying black, white, I'm saying as humans, we often stop at exploring the why. Why do we feel this way? If we say things like, I don't want my child to make the same mistakes I did. And then we just stop there. What are those mistakes? Why did you make those mistakes? What have you learned from those mistakes? What are you doing to ensure that you never make those mistakes again? And once you figure that out, that's what we should be teaching our children. That's what we should be talking to and communicating. These are the messages that should be sent for children and our peers even. And absolutely right, Alvin. It's much harder to teach a broken man or change a broken man than it is for a child. Absolutely agree with that. But that broken man or woman needs to understand why they're broken first. What did they do? What happened? What did they learn from it? And then what are they doing to ensure that they don't make those mistakes again, that they don't stay broken? You talked about healing, Sherry. I mean, you're right. Healing is great for if you're able to do it. But are we all trying to heal together? Are we all trying to make sure that we are going in the same direction? Obviously, we're not. Like Mr. Campbell said, we're fighting each other more than we are helping and learning from each other. So it starts and ends with communication, but before you do that, you still have to make sure you understand, how did I get to this point? What happened to me? What am I dealing with? What that got me here feeling this way? And then how do I change that? How do I heal from that? How do I do that? And then how do I share that with others? Let's get to those steps. Let's complete that cycle. And I hope from there we'll start to see some change in our relationships.
And I think you all hit on some great points there. And I want to talk a little bit about that healing and the trauma part. Oftentimes what's going on within us affects how we relate to other people. And that's what creates issues in our relationships. What are some of the most common issues that hinder men and women in relationships? What are some of the most common issues? And Sherry, I ask you to do something for me with, talk to some of your peers to kind of find out from the women, like, what are some of the questions or issues that they have with men, a question they always want to ask men when it comes to relationships. But I want to just talk for a little bit of what are some of the common issues that cause the problems in male-female relationships.
Oh.
Go ahead, Sherry.
Okay. For a lot of women, it's sexual abuse. It's a lot. It's a lot. I'm not too sure if my millennial men understand how many women are victims of sexual abuse, sexual assault, rape, molestation as a child, as an adult, been attacked multiple times, whichever way. That plays a huge role in your trust in the opposite sex. That plays a huge role in your trust in people, but it definitely plagues on how you view yourself and how you view others and men in regards to wanting a relationship. And it's one of the things that women are not very wanting to be open about because, of course, it's very private. And it's one of those things. It's also one of those things where you think you might have healed from the situation, and then you're triggered, and everything just kind of floods back over. It takes a very, very long time for that, for us to get to a space where we can talk about it. We feel safe. We can talk about triggers if we've been able to identify them. I would probably say another reason, it's just the women don't think the men are men in terms of what they've envisioned or what they've been shown. They could have been raised in a 2-parent household, healthy marriage. You know, their dad treated them like a princess, so they kind of have that princess mentality where your boyfriend is supposed to kind of take over your dad's role and do all the things that your dad used to do. That's not the case. That's not, not really how it's supposed to be, because your boyfriend is not your dad. And so having appropriate standards and appropriate expectations of the person that you are looking to date, or the man that you're preparing yourself for, and also bringing to the table that individual needs as well. Because like I said earlier, everybody's not going to want everything. And you may be a 10, but you may not be a 10 for the guy that you're interested in, and vice versa. So I think it's just the observation that you are not for everybody, and that's okay. And stop trying to force yourself on the person that you want to be with.
Any other comments on that?
I would like to add with that, what Sherry said, the sexual abuse, like, yeah, that is like a surprise to me. I guess I would say about 2 to 3 years ago, I mean, I was like, I would talk to some of my homegirls and they'll tell me like things that happened to them. And now in my head, I'm just kind of like, who did that? What guys are doing that? Because, it's just something like that's kind of hard for me to believe. And then I'm just kind of like, wow, like you actually went through that. And then it's like, that changed my perspective as like, okay, maybe she acts this way because of this, because of that. Because that's news to me. I'll be honest with you. And like, when I hear about certain things that happen to certain women, and you go back and you think about how men would act certain times, I'll be like, okay, I saw this. I never thought of it that way. It could be something simple as, I remember when I was in college, we would have like parties or events, guys just grabbing women a certain way. I didn't really like think about it like a certain way, but then I'm when I go back and I'm just kind of like, you know what, that's like not right. You get what I'm saying? So that's actually huge. I just wanted to bring that up because that was something I just learned about. I never knew anything about that. So, and that's pretty big because a lot of men may not know about it too, like women being victims, and that's something we should know about and should, I guess, be aware more of. But I don't know.
Let me add, Brother Campbell, that to Sherry's point and as well, Mark. I spent quite a bit of time doing counseling, marital counseling and premarital counseling. I like to talk to people before they even go into a relationship. And what I try to do is try to hold up a mirror. Like the Bible says, this call shall leave his father and his mother, cleave to his wife, and the twain shall become one flesh. That leaving means like a severance of the past, to not carry over. And it mentions mother and father, but it really intends much more than that. It means the stuff that you receive while you are in mother's and father's home, while you are under their roof, and even pieces and parts of them. So what you don't transform, you transmit. So what happens in a lot of the relationships is that we come into a relationship and we begin to transmit, damage and trauma and hurt and pain. And we project that on the other person because that's the only person in front of us. and because we have not transformed it ourselves. And so when I see people who are not ready for marriage, they won't marry because they think that that is a cure-all. Once I get married, all this other stuff go away. I get in this relationship with this guy, I get in a relationship with this woman. All of a sudden, my past is cleared up. I'm whole now, but you're really not really whole, because you have to be whole to go into a whole relationship. And sometimes we have like a 10% battery, and we connect with this particular person and we think we're going to be 100%. No, you got to have 100% of you that will make 50% in a relationship, but you got to bring 100% of you, because if you don't bring 100% of you, you're going to have a deficit, and that's going to show up in the relationship. And then finally, I would say that a lot of times when we go into a relationship, there's no, for lack of a better term, I'm going to say coach, because that's the catchphrase now. Everybody, relationship coach. And it's hard to be a coach in a relationship when you ain't there when they argue. You're not there with them in the bed. You're not there when there are insensitivities going on in a relationship. So what needs to happen, I'm just a firm believer that a man, before he marries a woman, he needs some kind of certificate, whether that's a real certificate or just a make-believe certificate. Listen, I qualified. And a woman should not even submit to marrying a man who have not qualified for her heart. He's really prepared. He knows how to treat your heart. But what happens is desperation set in. Anything, anybody, he got 2 legs, let me have, you see what I'm saying? Because there's this desperation out there. And then same thing for men. Men are looking for the wrong thing. Favor is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman that fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Men are looking at body types. You know what I mean? Is she fine? Is she a dime? Is she a quarter? They looking at that. They're not looking at the heart. Therefore, marriage, in relationship, sex becomes habituated. It'll get old. And you say, okay, I want a new car. So we start treating women like cars. I'm trading this one in, I'm getting a new one. I just saw that shiny one. Did y'all see the 2021? You know what I mean? And then if you don't have your bearing straight as far as what relationship is, what the core of it is, then you miss it all together, and then you pass that on to the next generation as well. So it's just a downward spiral, if you will.
And Brian, before you add your comments, I wanted to say somebody just mentioned a question on YouTube about mental health, and we talked about that last week. And I think a lot of times we underestimate the role that mental health plays in our relationships. You talk about trauma, you talk about abuse and all those things. Those things leave a mark on our spirit and in our mind sometimes, which oftentimes affects our behavior. And so I think it's important to highlight the fact that that mental health does affect our relationships with one another. Go ahead, Brian.
Definitely. Ms. Campbell, one of your questions obviously was about what are some of the issues that are out there. And Sherry, I definitely thank you for bringing that up, because that's something that, as guys, and Mark obviously articulated this even better than I'm about to, as men, we don't get a chance, we don't discuss, we don't talk about, we don't hear it, and we don't see it. And to be quite honestly, there may be times we ignore it or we refuse to see it from our friends, from the people we know and love and associate with when it comes to sexual abuse or any kind of abuse of a man against a woman. So bringing that up in its type of discussion is definitely one of the things that can help solve these issues, and bringing it to light and understand that there are women who are dealing with this all the time at staggering percentages. They may not be speaking up, but they are dealing with it. And therefore, there are men that are committing these acts. There are men that are doing these things. Our friends, people we know, are doing these things. And we need to make sure that we're aware of that and understand that and bring it to light in whatever ways we can, because it is really I don't see anything that could be bigger when you talk about what is the static or what are the issues between male and female. If something where a female feels unsafe around a male, I mean, there is no relationship that can be had. There's nothing you can't start with the foundation of being safe, then you can't go anywhere after that. So if we can't attack and respect if we can't respect women the way they deserve to be respected, then we're never gonna have a good relationship with them. We can let that go. So we got to start there, absolutely. And anytime, and I'll just talk to the fellas here very quickly. Anytime we hear a friend of ours or a guy, and whatever we're having conversations, and I'm sorry, Mr. Campbell, what I'm about to say here, but I'm gonna keep it light. But if we hear somebody got with a girl, right? They got with a girl, it was always 100% of the time. It was a willing thing. It was a thing that would happen. It was consensual. It was agreed. It was understood. Anytime that story is being told, it was consensual. It was great. It's understood. So, Sherry, I wanted to share that with you more than anything to help understand and further Mark's point, because if we're not seeing it, that's because we're not hearing about it. Because our friends, our guys, our circles, they're not
telling the story that way.
They're not telling the story accurately.
Of course not. They're not going to, because that's going to paint them in a
of course,
in a terrible light.
Absolutely. But like Mark said, if we do think back of maybe instances or situations or some type of ways, we may see some glimpse of it, but we're never going to get that story. So if we can't agree, if we can't understand and respect women, then what are we doing here? What are we doing here talking about a relationship with them if we can't even respect them? So we got to go back and handle that first and foremost. And I just wanted to add to that, Sherry, and thank you again for bringing that up, because that is a very big, serious issue between men and women that has to be addressed, corrected, worked on, understood, and agreed upon, and it has to get better. It definitely has to get better.
Ms. Campbell, can I insert right here just briefly? That it starts even earlier than that. When you see a little dude and he's hitting a girl or saying something to a girl, you got to start there, because whatever you tolerate, you also get permission to. And if you don't nip that in the bud while these kids are young, and then, you got social media, you got rap music, you got TV, love, hip, that shapes really the mindset, the paradigm. A man's attitude about a woman is to objectify, sexualize, et cetera, to denigrate. And so if you don't catch that early, that kid, that child, that little dude that has this attitude about this woman, he will go forward, and it's almost like a norm for him because he's never been checked right there. And if you never get checked on something, you think it's okay. So a woman's mindset about it and a man's mindset about it is two different things. And that's why you have all of these, cases that come up from time to time. And sometimes the men themselves, sometimes they are absolutely aloof of how critical, how crucial that pain, that trauma actually was. They tend to play it down. It's a man's world. Even when you go to court, the judge is up there, slapping men on the wrist. Why? Because he's a part of that culture too, and he brings that to bear in his ruling. It must be her fault. No, it ain't her fault. You see what I'm saying? But that's a part of the dominant mindset that pervasively kind of creates the culture. It, participates in the culture, and then it judges the culture.
Anybody else want to add anything before we move on? Because I think, when you talk about respecting women, right, just consider how women are portrayed and presented in society at large. The images, just like Brother Daniels mentioned, in the music and the movies, certain things, it's almost like, oh, it's okay, to treat a woman that way. That's what they like, you know. And so a lot of boys are hearing those, young men are hearing those things, and they those types of behaviors are often tolerated and encouraged, and it keeps that cycle going. But little do these individuals know that they're destroying these women. And I truly believe that, the way God designed this thing, we cannot have a success. We will not be successful as a race of people, as a human race, if we don't learn how to respect women. If we as men don't learn how to respect, it'll never work. And that's why we have a lot of problems that we have today.
Mr. Kim, can I slide something in right here? And this is just an observation on my part. And it's not that, like you got Mark on here. You got Mark is a millennial. He know how to respect women. You know what I mean? Upstanding young man. And there are many more like him.
Right.
There are actually Black men everywhere that love women, Black women, respect Black women, appreciate Black women, honor Black women. And there are women who respect themselves. They don't see themselves that way. But who gets the limelight? Who gets the television? Who gets the rotation on a radio station? Who dominates the Facebook cycles? Who dominates the media platforms? It's the dysfunctional stuff. And so when that dysfunctional stuff pervasively predominate, the time and the spaces and the bandwidths, we begin to think that everybody like this. Yeah. And that's not true. But if it's not true, but then that's all you see, then all you see becomes true in your mind. And therefore you move on what you believe is true, not necessarily true. And it's kind of like fake news becoming true. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Somebody just posted a question on Facebook, and I didn't realize the time had gotten away from us like that. I understand the man has the obligation to contain himself and have self-control. Where does the woman take accountability? Where does a woman take accountability? And I want to just say, this is why this conversation is being had, because I truly believe that if we as men change how we treat women, and as Sherry mentioned something earlier, a lot of women are not finding men in their definition of a man. You know what I'm saying? It's like, if men behave like the men that we can be and are supposed to be, and that we were created to be, then I believe that it will affect the actions of women and how, and the relationship dynamics. But because I think if you put the man together, if you pull that man together, if you get him together, it has a domino effect.
Yeah, of course.
And if the man ain't together, it also has a dominant effect. One of the things I want to bring up, and this is, we've seen recently women proposing to men. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on what are your thoughts about that, and what's right or wrong about it, depending on your perspective. What do you think about that? Don't everybody answer at once.
This is all I have.
I already see your expressions, Sherry.
No, I'm just saying this is all I have. It's a strong no. I just know.
I think as far as like men, we're supposedly like the hunters, and like we like to go after stuff that we like. So I feel like in a relationship, if a woman communicates, I want to get married, such and such. If that man really respects you, cares about you, loves you, and wants to be with you, he'll ask you like, will you marry me? You won't have to like force it down his throat. The moment you see yourself doing that, just know it's probably not going to work. For me, if I want to be with a woman, and I like, and that's what I desire, and then she tells me that, trust me, you'll know. Like that's a no for me. It's a disaster, I think, personally.
So I'll jump in on this too. I mean, definitely I'm not for it either. But I have to think about why am I not for it? I talked earlier about how too often we don't do the why. Why do we feel this way? And if I just think about it very quickly, it's not so much because of the tradition that has been created as far as someone asking a man asking a woman. I think it still goes back to kind of what we just touched on earlier when it comes to the respect for women and even the consent, if you want to just use that word. It's me asking your permission to spend the rest of your life with me as my wife. It becomes that I respect you, I love you, and I'm asking you. I don't want this to be a situation where we just live together, so now we're married, or we've been together for so many years and now we're married, or I call you wifey around my homeboys, so now we're married. I know it's not an understood thing. It's a respect thing that I'm asking you this question. Will you be my wife? Will you be my wife? And that to me just kind of goes back to the reason why I am saying no. I prefer myself to have asked that question as opposed to being asked to me, because of the respect and yes, I do view myself as the leader of the family. I know we can go into a biblical context.
I just made that comment on Facebook. Somebody made that. They said they think the man is supposed to lead. So
yes, I absolutely agree with that. I understand how that falls into place. So therefore, again, well, then I'm taking the lead on this chapter of our lives, of our relationship in this and I'm again asking you, will you do this with me? I'm seeing that this is something that I think we should go together to start our family. Will you join me? And making it an actual question, not an understanding, not just an understanding rather, but an actual question that deserves to have a yes behind it. That's just my thoughts on it.
Now before Sherry, you wanted to add something?
The reason why I say no, it's a strong no. I believe for me, the way I view it is that who then is gonna be the lead in that relationship? I feel like who asks for the proposal is the person who's going to lead that household in a sense. And because I am of a Christian faith and I'm trying my hardest to do this thing the biblical way, scripture says, he that findeth a wife, and the meaning of that scripture can be taken in a many different way, but he found her. She was already a wife. He decided that he wanted to marry her. He asked, hey, love, let's go. Let's go. I really feel like if she asked him to marry her, he is going to have a difficult time trying to level out that marriage later on. And I really want to see if these things are going to last, if they're going to work, 10, 15, 20 years from now, because it's a strong no for me.
Yeah.
I want to ask this question, Brother Daniels. I want you to remember when you asked Cynthia to marry you. When did you know that you wanted to get married, and what was the thought process that you went through? Because sometimes it seems like it takes some men a minute to get to that point where they, are willing to propose to a woman, ask her to marry. What was your thought process?
Okay, so let me answer first the question about the other one. I'm on the fence about it because I said, after my wife proposed to me, I said yeah, and so I'm on the fence about that one. I'm just kidding, Sherry. Look at Sherry. Look at No, I truly believe that a man ought to lead in a relationship, and that's the way it should be. And anything other than that is a sign of the social moral disorder of things, right? So I married at 20. And, I think we were already in the throes of marriage, like at, late 19 years old, maybe 20. It's not a one size fit all kind of thing. I was like a mature 19, 20-year-old. And when I decided to ask for my wife's hand in marriage, I was like ready to be married. And I kind of knew what it was, and I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew who I wanted to do it with, spend the rest of my life. I knew that. But for everybody, it's not the same. And how do you know? There's no tingle in your spine. There's nothing like that. And you have to be careful about the emotional aspect of it, because the emotional aspect of it will have you get married based on how you feel. You feel good, you feel like, you know what I mean? But it has to be something much more concrete. Person's value system, their goals, their aims, their objectives, their faith in God, what they bring to the table. Are you congenial minded? Is there synchronization of like the spirit of the thing? And so for different people, it's a different thing. But, across the board, it's this idea of you being ready to give her. You have to be together. When a man is together, he qualifies to get her. And then the question is, does she know that he is together? Because if she don't see him as together, he don't have no business getting hurt. You understand what I'm saying? So it's not a one size fit all kind of situation. And it is subject to the mindset that's coming to the table, both the man and the woman, to really make that determination. And AC, I prayerfully, faith plays a big part in this. Prayerful, I prayed that God would lead me to the right mate for me, the help meet, the soul mate for me, not just the woman. He that findeth the wife findeth a good thing. Not just the woman. You have to be clear about those distinctions as well.
Yeah. As we round out this conversation tonight, just give me what you would say is the key to a healthy relationship. And I know there are many things, multifaceted, whatever, but what would you say is the key to a healthy relationship that every man needs to know? I'm gonna put it that way. Every man needs to know.
That's a loaded question.
I know.
I'll jump in first because I kind of said it earlier. Not that this is the only thing that's the key or the only important thing, but I'll speak from my my head and heart at the same time when I say communication. But what communication really is? See, a lot of times people think that just communications just simply means talking, or even more so, it means agreeing with someone. Communication simply means understanding what someone else is saying. That's it. You don't have to always agree with someone, but you should always seek to understand them. That is what communication is. When you think about, you learn the language, English, you just learn it so that you can understand what someone else is saying, right? You didn't learn it so that you can agree with what they're saying. So it should be no different when it comes to how to effectively communicate in a relationship, any relationship, but especially one of a man and woman. So don't get caught up so much in the winning of the argument, or I'm right, or they're wrong. No, it's understand. I need to understand where you're coming from. I might not agree with where you're coming from, but I love you so much, and I care about your feelings so much that I want to understand it. So, and I want you to understand me and what I'm saying, where I'm coming from. And then when we come together with an understanding, 10 times out of 10, you'll get to a compromise if there's a disagreement, or you may find out that the other person's way is actually better than your way, than what you learned or what you thought, and they may find out that your way is actually better. But you can't find that out until you seek to understand. So I would say communication obviously is key, but with that thought and feeling in mind when it comes to communication, what actually are you communicating and how are you communicating and what does that mean in your relationship? That's really where I feel a big key is.
Thank you, sir. We're going around to everybody.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead, Brother Daniels.
No. Ladies first.
To add to what Mr. Bryan said, I would, because that's what I was going to say, but then something else popped up, and to show yourself and each other grace. And just understand that we've been through a lot as a people, and unfortunately some of it is generational, and a lot of us are working on breaking those curses and breaking those patterns in our family. Maybe we come from generations of divorce, or maybe we come from generations of abuse, or whatever those things can be. Just to show each other grace on top of the communication, and be willing to listen, to comprehend, and know how to communicate to the person that you're talking to. Because how I talk to Mr. Campbell may be different by how I talk to Mark, and how I talk to Brother Daniels, and how I talk to Mr. Bryan. So understand who it is that you're talking to, and be able to make sure that what you're saying and what you're intending to say is what's being comprehended. Because there's a lot of things that get misconstrued because people are not understanding what they're saying. And like I said, just give grace.
To add to that, communication, I feel like is very important, but I think with my generation, we have to heal, because you can communicate. The person could be a good communicator, and I may want to listen, and I may actually do listen and actually comprehend. But if I have my own demons I'm facing and I'm not whole, it's not going to work. A lot of us, we're just like mentally not there. And it has a lot to do with traumas or whatever it may be. And, you know, I'm glad like our generation is talking about mental health and going to see therapists, because that's actually important. I would say like the problems I've had to deal with, or the problems I caused, a lot of it was just from not being whole. And that's my thing.
Good stuff.
So I think the biggest key that I can offer to a healthy relationship is God. I believe that everything flows from the head down. I believe healing comes from God. I believe balance comes from God. I believe alignment comes from God. So I think when God is in his place, in his proper place in everybody's life, it pretty much guarantees that the flow that comes from that will rectify. I was brought up in a single family home. Mom, dad wasn't married. My mom had me at 16. Dad was 20, at the time. And so all of the dysfunctions that you could imagine would come with that, I was a part of that. I absorbed that coming up. And so those attitudes about women, the stuff that we're talking about right now, that was me. So it wasn't until I got in Christ and, God intervened in my life that, my life took on a whole nother shape, a whole nother form. And if you could imagine me without the Lord, without God coming into this world and trying to do this stuff like family, like marriage, like being responsible, like raising, children, those kind of things, I couldn't do it. And so if there was one key that I can offer to anybody, it would be God. And that's a surefire way of making sure everything else falls into its proper place.
All right. And we're going to end on that note. Get in line. Get in line. And so, guys, I thank you all so much. Thank you, Bryan Oliver. Thank you, Sherry Robinson. Mark, thank you. My youth minister, I appreciate you, Brother Daniel.
Beat me to it, man.
Appreciate you all. Now, next Tuesday, we're going to be talking about fatherhood. And that's going to be a great time. We got another dynamic panel scheduled for next Tuesday. So we want everybody to make sure you tune in, join us next Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. And let's do it all we can to heal so we can have healthy relationships. It's amazing that the word heal is a part of healthy. And so in order for us to be healthy, we got to heal. And so I definitely appreciate the conversation tonight. Hopefully it's helped someone to understand what you need to do as a man to heal and to have healthy relationships. God bless everybody. You all have a good night. Thank you, panel.
Thank you.
And for the
Thank you
opportunity.
very much.
Have a good night, everybody.